Prank, a BEK story. Every urban area has its psych ward. The place where they're gonna come and take you away, haha. The place where they come and take you away too, if you start acting a little too weird. Where I come from, it was 999 Queen Street. I go there once a month. As a visitor. To see my best friend, Frankie. He's been in there 3 years, and once a month I go and sit with him, even though he hasn't spoken to me or anyone else since that awful night 3 years ago. I sit there for an hour in silence. People ask me why I go. They say, I bet he doesn't even know who you are. And I don't have a good answer. Penance, I guess. I feel somehow responsible for what happened, if only because I didn't participate in the fatal affair or try and stop it. You see, Frankie was a prankster who was always playing practical jokes, some of the mean ones, on people. It was a golden day in late autumn. I was basking in the sun out back of the school, basking out back, listening to some tunes and chillin', if you can be chillin' while sunbathing. Frankie suddenly loomed over me, even though he's a bit of a shrimp, and when I looked at him, I almost crapped my pants. His eyes were gone. Or should I say, they were black. 2 pools of solid black, staring down at me. What the fu-, I started to say, when he burst into whoops of laughter. Pretty scary, eh? What? Are those black contacts? I'm a BEK. What? You know, the black-eyed kids? The black-eyed children? I might have been alone in the universe, but I'd never heard of the black-eyed children. Frankie told me the black-eyed kids, or BEK, were demons in the form of supernatural children who would ring your doorbell, usually late at night, and ask to come inside, either to use the telephone to call their parents or to use the bathroom. And it was big trouble if you let them in. According to Frankie, I was the only person in the known universe who hadn't heard about them. Next thing, you'll be telling me you never heard of the night floaters. Well, those kids would scare the shit out of me if they knocked on my door at night, I admitted. But what are you up to? I have an idea. I was afraid of that. You do know about the ridge, of course, don't you? The ridge was a local lover's lane, a dirt trail leading to a clearing in the woods above the 16. And, knowing Frankie like I did, I was afraid to hear what he had in mind. Everybody else in the world knows about the black-eyed kids, even if you don't. What do you think would happen if 2 of them suddenly appeared at the window when people were making out in the back seat? Talk about scaring the shit, eh? Way more terrifying than the hook, even. Sounds to me like a good way to get your head punched in. Nah, they'd be so terrified they'd take off. We got nothing to worry about. What do you mean, we? Well, I got a pair of black contacts for you, too. No way I'm doing that. Come on. Come on. I'm not interested in getting myself murdered. Besides, it's creepy. It's only a prank. It's perverted. All right. I'll get Dave then. Dave was always the threat whenever I didn't want to do something. Frankie could talk him into anything. Well, Dave could have this one. I intended to keep well out of it. Or so I intended. Frankie couldn't even interest me by suggesting I might scare the girl of my dreams, Kim, from getting it on with some jock in the back seat. As if I had the power to do that. I went with Frankie and Dave the night of the prank, but stayed in the car, which was well away from the other vehicles. It was Frankie's old Ford Explorer. He handed me the keys and I turned it around. I figured we might need to make a quick getaway. So I sat there, radio surfing and scrolling through my messages, when I heard somebody running down the dirt path. I was ready to put the car in gear when Dave surprised the hell out of me by booking it past me without even slowing down. I yelled out the window, "Hey, where the hell are you going?" Instead of stopping, Dave hollered, "Run! Run!" as he pelted down the trail. Swearing, I jumped out of the Explorer and started down the path to find out what was going on. Don't ask me why I didn't drive. I just went on foot, okay? I saw Frankie staggering towards me, like he was drunk or something. And all the time, he was pushing with his hands, pushing something away from him, something that was not there. "Frankie? You okay, bro?" I said. But he just stared at me with those damn black contacts. Come on, bro, don't do that to me," I said, figuring he was spoofing me. "It ain't funny." And that's when I noticed he was drooling and that he'd pissed himself. Somehow I got him into the Explorer and was just about to take him. I wasn't sure if I should take him home or take him to the hospital when I saw them. They were right outside the windows. 3 of them, a goth guy and 2 goth chicks, in dark hoodies and with those black eyes, those awful black eyes. Eyes I knew were not black contacts. Solid black eyes, orbs that were real. They were staring in at us and tapping on the windows and chanting, "Frankie, Frankie." Frankie started screaming, and I peeled out of there, with those hideous black-eyed children running alongside us and laughing. Frankie. Witty, humorous, charming Frankie. Hasn't spoken since that night. No, he doesn't talk, but he screams sometimes. Sometimes all night. Dave hasn't been right in the head since. He told me that he and Frankie, wearing those fucking black contacts, approached a likely parked car, a likely victim, when we were suddenly surrounded by those fucking kids, touching us all over and whispering our names. Frankie yells at me to run, and I ran. But that ain't the worst part of it, bro. The worst part of it is that those kids, those black-eyed kids, they know where I live, and sometimes at night, they're outside my house, and they tap on the windows and call me by name. By name. For some reason, the black-eyed kids have left me alone. But the guilt won't leave me alone, which is why I'm sitting here, watching Frankie shudder and drool. I know it wasn't my fault, but I still feel guilty. Maybe I could have stopped it. Maybe. A big maybe. Suddenly, Frankie begins screaming, just like on that night, looking wide-eyed towards the barred window. There are 3 kids outside the window, 3 teens wearing dark hoodies, with evil, hypnotic eyes of obsidian blackness, whispering Frankie's name, and whispering my name. My name. They have found me too. They have found me too. Watcher. I quit my job on my 62nd birthday. I just couldn't do it anymore. My birthday is Halloween, so my resignation had a certain artistic quality. It also gave me a distraction, since I spent my first hours of freedom serving the children of their neighborhood their trick-or-treats. It was fun. You see, I'm a widower and I live alone. We never had kids. No dog or cat or goldfish. So it gets pretty quiet around here. Sometimes too quiet. I've always been a workaholic, but a friend of mine told me, "You won't do a damn thing for 6 months after you retire. Won't want to." I didn't believe him, but like most things you don't care to believe, it turned out to be true. I guess it's the natural enjoyment of not having to do things, having to do them. And so I did nothing. Nothing at all. But right away, I noticed something had changed in my daily behavior. The living room window. I'd never spent much time looking out of it, at least when my wife was alive. I'd just glance out to see if it was raining or if the grass needed cutting, the usual stuff. But now that I was retired, it sounded odd to say it, but I was in fact retired, I found myself drawn to it, my window to the world. I found myself standing in front of it all hours of the day, and nighttime too. I looked out first thing in the morning when I got up. If I went to the kitchen, I'd stop and look out. If I went to the can, I'd stop and look out just before going to bed. If a car or a construction vehicle went by, I'd look out. If I heard a dog barking or children crying, I'd look out. And if someone, especially a woman, walked by, I would stare at them. Sometimes when people on the street were talking or laughing or making noise, I found myself resenting them. Get off my lawn. I must really be getting old. Another thing that changed was my sleeping patterns. I used to have to go to bed early, as I had work the next day. But now I was up half the night, and naturally, I always had to look out at the quiet street before lights out. Winter had come, and with it the snow, which seemed to confer an added hush to the street outside my window. But on this night, as I looked out, expecting to see nothing but the white of my lawn and the dark houses of my neighbors, I was startled. Well, more than just startled, to see 2 children standing in the middle of the nocturnal street. One kid was much taller than the other, and I instantly thought of them as a brother and younger sister, although I couldn't explain how I knew that, as both heads were covered by dark hoodies. What the hell were those kids doing out this late? It was 1:30 in the morning, on a school night. I instinctively headed towards the front door and was about to open it, but before I could turn on my porch light and step out, something stopped me. A cold, icy, in the pit of the stomach fear, as thick and impenetrable as a wall. In truth, I was suddenly scared shitless. I backed away from the door, then crept over to the window and tried to peep out unobserved. Now the kids were closer, standing on the path leading to the front steps. I jumped back in surprise, and I knew, even though I kept to the shadows, they knew I was there. I slipped back into the main hallway, just as there came a knocking at my door. I stood frozen from both the sudden cold which filled the passage and from sheer terror. "Please, sir, won't you please let us in? Please, sir, let us in." I said nothing and began to back away. "Please, Bill, please let us in. We're cold and we're frightened and need to come inside and get warm. Please, Bill, please." They knew my name. How the hell did they know that? I finally found my voice and managed to choke out, "Go away." "Please, Bill, you must let us in. Please." "Go away. Go away or I'm phoning the police." "But you're going to let us in." "No, I'm calling the police." "No, you're not." And I wasn't going to call them, although I couldn't have explained why. Somehow I just didn't want to get them involved in this situation. Besides, what could I have said? That I'm being menaced by some little kids outside my house? "We know you're in there alone." How could they know that too? Had they been spying on me? I crept to the door to make sure it was locked, then hurried to lock my side door. And the whole time the house rang with metallic laughter. Their laughter, which had a false and inhuman quality, as if it was a recording. I was stumbling down the hallway, intending to lock myself in the bedroom, when the next words made me stop dead. "We know you're lonely, Bill. We know you're lonely since Mummy died. We're the children you always wanted, Bill." "No," I choked out, just as I became aware my face was wet with tears. "Let us in." I slammed the bedroom door and locked it. They continued to call out to me, but softly, quietly, like they were in the same room and whispering to me. I covered my ears and kept reciting, "1 steamboat, 2 steamboats, 3 steamboats, 4 steamboats," to try and drown them out. In the end, I slept and dreamt. I was in a city park, a park which looked like an illustration from an old picture book, and I was holding hands with 2 children dressed in black, a slim boy and a younger girl, who I knew instinctively were my children. My heart overflowed with love, the deepest, most all-encompassing love I had ever experienced. They were my children. "Please, Daddy," they said in unison. "We're hungry. May we have something to eat?" Yes, you may have something to eat," I said joyously. And they pulled me to the ground with arms of steel and tore out my throat, my hot red blood spurting into their pale faces, their black eyes. I awoke with a scream to find them both standing at the foot of the bed, their heads covered with identical hoodies, their obsidian eyes appearing to somehow glow in the lightless room. "Hi, Daddy," they said in unison. "We're home." In a previous video, Night Shadows, I learned that I had disappeared in Lions Valley Park during a visit to the abandoned cemetery of Proudfoot's Hollow. I had apparently vanished and had been missing for an hour, an event for which I had no memory. I was naturally very concerned that this might be a missing time episode. So in order to find out what happened, I engaged the help of a psychologist who used a combination of deep relaxation and hypnotism to unlock my memories. Although it might have been better if they had stayed locked. The psychologist, who will be known as Jane, led me to discover the following. I had actually gone into the bushes to relieve myself, as we'd had a few beers earlier, in honor of the fact that we had all turned 18 recently, and now we're men. Ha ha. But I hadn't gone very far into the trees when I heard a voice that I knew. It was Tess, a girl in my grade 13 class, who I thought was pretty hot. I used to see her around in bars and other places, but she was always with a covey of other girls, so I was afraid to approach her. I began to look around for her and found her off in the trees, smiling and beckoning to me. Naturally, I headed towards her, only to have her turn away and run deeper into the woods, before turning to laugh at me over her shoulder. I saw she was barefoot, which I thought was pretty sexy, but also pretty strange. It was April, so it was still cool at night, particularly in the woods. But desire had short-circuited my brain, so I followed her, mindlessly. Upon reflection, the whole thing was like some crazy dream, or nightmare. She never said anything other than to call my name, and she only called me when she was momentarily out of sight. But what was even stranger was that I remained silent. I didn't laugh or call out to her, call her by name. Just chased after her, drunk on love or lust or something. And I also lost track of time. Tess led me further in amongst the trees, which seemed to go on forever. I'd been to Lions Valley Park many times, and the woods never seemed so extensive. It was like being up north, in the wilderness. We finally reached a clearing, and Tess finally stopped and turned towards me. She held out her arms to me, and I ran to her, and just as I reached her, her laughing, sparkling eyes suddenly turned into two orbs of complete darkness, two black holes burning in her smiling face, and I was suddenly enveloped in glaring, intense, silver-white light which faded into Stygian blackness. I came to in a huge examining room, which was more like an operating theater. It was dark and crowded with shadowy figures, some traditional gray aliens with thin arms and huge black eyes, the others basically normal people, although their eyes also appeared to be totally black. I felt disoriented from the weird pulsing sounds and the strobe effects of the bright oscillating lights. I was placed butt naked on an operating table. Directly above me and attached to the ceiling loomed a huge metallic needle, and as I watched in horror, it was lowered towards me and pierced the skin of my abdomen. I screamed and then I passed out. I woke up on a table in still another shadowy room. At first I thought I was alone, but then I realized that Tess was on the other table, also naked. And as soon as I noticed her, she sat up and turned to look at me and I saw her eyes were still two cold, totally black orbs staring at me. And as I watched, transfixed, she slid off the table and moved towards me, and I heard, in my mind, Tess say, "You will have sex with me now." And, of course, I did. But I'm still not really sure exactly what happened, even with the recovered memories. We had sex, but silently and robotically and without a word. And all the time, I was transfixed by her black eyes. I say her, since I'm not sure if it really was Tess. I was transfixed by the unceasing radiation of gloom from those black eyes. And the next thing I knew, I was stumbling out of the trees, and my buddies were bawling me out for having disappeared on them, and I had no memory of what had just happened. But looking back, I remember being obsessed with Tess after all this happened. I was always hanging around her, asking her out and hinting at what happened. Remember that night at Lions Valley Park? She got fed up with my attentions and intentions and sent her brother, who was a great big dude and about 7 feet tall, to discourage me, which he did in a very physical manner. So I stayed discouraged. But if I had remembered those black eyes, I would never have gone near her. Eventually, Tess disappeared from school, and the rumor went round that she was pregnant. I remember feeling a little sad at the time, but now that my memories have returned, I have to ask myself, did I get Tess pregnant? What do you think, dear listeners? Did I really make love to Tess? Or to something else? Some other kind of entity? Why was I taken? And what is the connection between the gray aliens and the black-eyed humans? Is this where the black-eyed children come from? I'm still working with Jane. My friends and I experienced another missing time episode while having a bush party at the silo, the remains of an abandoned farm, and the numero uno party spot in town. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and stay safe, stay subscribed, ring the bell so you won't miss any upcoming videos, and feel free to share this video with anyone you please. If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories about cryptids such as the night floaters, werewolves, and black-eyed children. Till midnight. Cheers.